Okay, folks, so in today's lesson, we're going to be looking at the institutions of the European Union. Last lesson, we were looking at the aims of the EU, and you had to do some work about has the EU met its aims or not met its aims. Today, we're going to be looking at the institutions. Now, if you look at the exam specification, there's not actually bullet points on the institutions. Therefore, you're not going to be asked a question like, you validate the view that the European Parliament is more powerful than the European Commission. Anything like that. It's a bit of a shame, actually. I did quite a good essay on that at university, I seem to remember. Anyway, but it is quite useful to know, especially when we look at issues to do with sovereignty and how the EU and the UK kind of make policy and the influence the EU has on UK policy making, which actually is one of the bullet points you'll notice. So what I'm going to do, I'll probably end up doing two videos because to record a PowerPoint free only just lets you do 15 minutes. So what I will do, I'm going to go through the first bit of the PowerPoint on one video, the second bit on another video where I'll set the homework for Thursday as well. So the aim of these two sessions is to have a working knowledge of the institutions of the European Union, and then as I said, that will then set you up for questions on issues like sovereignty and issues to do with EU policy making, etc, etc. Okay, so on the PowerPoint I'll attach the sheet which goes with this, but essentially I'm going to go through these EU institutions and how they work. Okay, so the first thing to get about the EU is that it's actually quite unusual. As we know, most governments around the world are made up of a legislature, a judiciary and an executive. The EU is unusual in the fact that it has no single institution which is an executive and no single institution, well, I suppose there's the European Parliament, which is the legislature, I suppose. But it's quite unusual that there's not one institution that has one of these particular functions, so to speak. The other key phrase to get for the EU, and this also applies to things like NATO to some extent, and more in particular the United Nations, is the fact that it's supranational. Okay, which means that the institutions of the EU, or some of them anyway, don't serve one particular nation state. They serve the EU as a whole. And again, that's very much like the United Nations, whereby the different bodies of the UN don't suit the needs of one nation state. They serve the UN itself. It's like an extra nation kind of thing, isn't it? Some of the institutions of the EU, though, are what they call intergovernmental. Which basically means that they serve both the member states and also the EU itself. And the function of these institutions is to allow voices for the different member states and to allow for cooperation between those different institutions. Okay, so the first institution we're going to have a look at is the European Commission, which you've probably heard of. There's a nice picture there of what the Commission building looks like. In many respects, this can be seen to be the executive branch, although, as I said before, there's actually more than one executive institution of the European Commission. And it's a supranational institution. So in other words, the European Commission serves the interests of the European Union as opposed to the individual member states. Okay then, so the first question is, well, how do you become a member of the European Commission? Well, basically, each member state has one member of the European Commission, and that commissioner is responsible for policy over a particular area. So in other words, I suppose you could say that each member state is kind of in charge of one specific area of policy, I suppose. Now, the character, this is actually, I meant to change this actually. Under David Cameron, this guy was our European Commissioner, Jonathan Hopkins Hill. He was a Lord Baron, and Britain has normally had the position of being responsible for financial stability, financial services and capital markets. There's a couple of commission jobs which are seen as being particularly important, and this is one of them, to do with finances and financial services, one of the key areas of integration. So Britain's always had one of the top three kind of commissioner kind of roles, and it's usually been this finance job that Britain has usually had, or had, should I say. So, what does the European Commission do? Well, its main function is to draft EU law. Okay, and there's two types of EU law. There's directives and there's regulations. A directive is basically a goal which member states must achieve, and they can achieve that through their own different laws. So the EU might say, we want all member states to, I don't know, reduce CO2 emissions by a certain date. Well, they don't actually pass the details of that. They then say it's the responsibility then of like Britain and France and Germany and wherever else to actually pass their own laws in their own states in order to achieve that kind of ambition. And the other type of law which the European Commission drafts are regulations. And this is a law passed by the European Union which is then binding on all member states and is immediately enforceable. Now, very often regulations not often go down to the lowest denominator, okay, because obviously they want to make sure that all member states have the ability to implement it. So there's a lot of kind of negotiations take place regarding this. So one function of the European Commission is therefore to draft, not make, well it is to make, but it's not to enforce, it's to draft EU laws. Okay, what else does it do? Well, it then enforces these EU laws on all member states. So if it's passed a regulation, okay, or a directive, it then needs to make sure that's being enforced. So if it's a directive, say we need to cut CO2 emissions by a certain amount, okay, they'll then ask the member states every 2 years to say how far close are you on this, what laws have you passed on this, you've not passed any laws, you need to get your arse into gear, that type of stuff. If it's a regulation, then obviously they're going to say, you know, we passed this regulation, it's in your country's law, why haven't you done it? And its third function is they see themselves as being the guardian of the treaties. So all those treaties for the European Union, so things like the Maastricht Treaty in 1992, the Single European Act, the Amsterdam Treaty, Rome Treaty, all these various treaties, the European Commission sees as being the guardian of those treaties. In other words, to make sure what was agreed by the member states at these various treaties are actually kind of taking place, for want of a better phrase. So that is the European Commission. And again, if you get a question about UK sovereignty and has it moved away from Parliament and all that kind of stuff, well, you could actually make an argument and say, well, actually, Britain has a voice in the European Union and therefore hasn't lost sovereignty, i.e. we've got one of the members of the European Commission which helps to draft laws. So in that respect, sovereignty is being shared, not taken away in that respect. So if you get a question about sovereignty in Parliament, you can say we have at least one member in the European Commission which is involved in drafting laws. You probably need to put much more detail in that, to be honest with you, in an essay. But it shows the examiner that you know what you're talking about, kind of. Okay, this other body is also a member of the executive as well, and this is the European Council, and there's a picture of it on the things. It's got rather nice floor colourings, I always think. Okay, just checking on me. Yeah, got a bit of time. Yep. Okay, now this is again an executive branch, and it meets 4 times a year. So once a quarter, the European Council all meet up. Now, its membership is different to the European Commission because to be in the European Council, you've got to be a head of a national government or a foreign minister of a national government. So basically, up until we left in January, 4 times a year, the UK Prime Minister would go to the European Council. And there she'd meet the French President and the German Chancellor and the Polish President, or whoever it is they have, okay, in the European Council. So it meets at least 4 times a year, and they meet every 4 times a year. If the Prime Minister can't make it for some reason, then the Foreign Secretary would go in their place. Also members of this body is the President of the European Council. So within this institution, they elect like a President of the Council, and also the President of the European Commission. So the most important member of the European Commission also attends these meetings as well. You've got a nice picture there of Theresa May on this next PowerPoint slide. Okay, so what does it do? It sets the general political direction of the EU. So basically at these meetings, they'll look ahead to say, well, over the next couple of years, we want to make some progress on integrating this industry, or we want to make some progress on enlarging the EU, or whatever it is which they decide to do. So it sets the general political direction, which then, if you think about it, then informs the European Commission what type of regulations might be required or directives. So if they decide that they want to integrate more of the financial industry across the EU, then obviously that sends a message then to the European Commission that they need to, look at how they can do that possibly. So in that respect, again, it showed the member states having a big say in the direction of the EU. It also makes strategic decisions on foreign policy, which might affect the EU, and EU economics. So again, they're looking at these big strategic kind of long-term areas, I suppose. They also agree to any changes to treaties. So when they're looking at changing a treaty, like the creation of the Amsterdam Treaty or the Maastricht Treaty or whatever it is, it has to be agreed at the European Council by each of the member states. It's a unanimous vote. And so again, if you get a question about sovereignty and the UK or any other member state for that matter, you could argue, well actually, the heads of each state, including the UK government, have a big say at the European Council. If they don't like something that's going to come about in a treaty or something like that, then they can essentially have their say and I suppose even wreck it, I suppose, if they really wanted to. So at this institution, member states, their national interests and politics are often heard. And this can reduce the influence of the European Commission. So whereas the European Commission is a supranational institution which just deals with the EU, this institution, if you like, gives a national kind of viewpoint on what the European Commission wants to do. So directives and stuff from the European Commission, sometimes they can fall foul at the European Council, because the European Council might say that goes against our national interest. We don't like where the EU Commission is going with that. We want to make some changes or whatever. So national interests are very much heard at the European Council. But again, because it's the head of states involved in this, it's obviously attentive with the, what they perceive as being the big important issues. Okay, this is where it gets a bit confusing because it's got a very similar name. You've also got the Council of the European Union. This used to be known as the Council of Ministers, which in some ways I think was an easier title to try and relay what this institution does. What I will do, I'll discuss this in the next video, just so I make sure I keep my 15 minutes and I give you time to talk about it without being cut off midway through. So I'll see you again in a couple of minutes.